I am 91 years old, and I have been a widow for almost 12 of them. People still say my marriage was a beautiful thing, something to admire. I nod when they say it. I don't correct them anymore. There isn't much use in correcting things this late. 52 years, they say, as if the number explains everything, as if time itself proves something good. I suppose it does, in a way, but it doesn't tell you what those years felt like while they were happening. It doesn't tell you what was said or what wasn't. It doesn't tell you how quiet a house can become, even when two people are still living in it. I am telling you now because there isn't much time left for me, and because I spent most of my life not saying what I should have said. I met him when I was 23. He was steady. That's the word everyone used. Steady, reliable, sensible. My mother liked him immediately. My father shook his hand and said, "This one will take care of things." That seemed important back then. I wasn't unhappy when I said yes. I want to be clear about that. I didn't feel like I was making a mistake. We married in a small church. I remember my shoes were a little too tight, and I was thinking about that more than anything else during the ceremony. That's how ordinary it felt. Not like a grand beginning, just something you step into because it's time. We moved into a small house with a narrow kitchen and a window that looked out onto a neighbor's fence. He worked long hours from the beginning. That was part of what made him steady, I suppose. I learned his routines quickly. He liked his tea at the same time every evening. He didn't like noise when he came home. He folded his clothes in a very particular way. These things became the shape of my days without me noticing. In the early years, we talked more. Not about anything especially deep, just small things. Who we saw, what needed fixing, what bills were due. I thought that was what conversation was supposed to be. I didn't question it. There were moments, though, small ones. I would start to say something about how I felt, about being lonely in the afternoons, or about wanting to go somewhere different for a change. And I would see his face tighten, just slightly. Not anger, just discomfort. So I learned to stop before finishing. It didn't feel like a sacrifice at the time. It felt like keeping things peaceful. And peace, I thought, was the same as happiness. We had 2 children, a boy first, then a girl. They filled the house in a way that made everything else quieter. Their needs were immediate, clear. Feed them, dress them, listen to them. It gave me a place to put my attention. He loved them, I don't doubt that. But his love looked like providing. Longer hours, more responsibility, more distance. I remember one evening, our son was maybe 7. He had a school play, just a small one, nothing important. He had one line. He practiced it all week. His father said he would try to come. We both knew what that meant. The boy stood on that stage, scanning the room before he spoke. I could see him looking for his father's face. When he didn't find it, he said his line anyway. He did it well. Afterward, he asked me, "Did Dad have to work?" I said yes. That became the answer for many things. I told myself it was necessary, that this was how a good life was built. You put in the hours, you make things stable, and later, you enjoy it. We use that word a lot, later. We'll talk later. We'll rest later. We'll take a trip later. Later became a kind of promise we both believed in, without ever checking when it was supposed to arrive. As the years went on, our conversations became shorter. Not because of anger. There wasn't much of that. It was something else, a kind of quiet agreement to stay on the surface. We talked about groceries, about repairs, about what the children needed. We didn't talk about how we felt about each other. Not really. I don't remember the last time he told me he loved me in a way that felt like he was saying it for the first time. But I also don't remember asking him to. That's the part people don't see when they admire a long marriage. They don't see how easy it is to let things remain unsaid because nothing is breaking loudly enough to demand attention. Nothing dramatic happened in our marriage. No betrayal, no shouting, no doors slammed in anger. Just a slow narrowing, a quiet settling into roles that left very little room for anything unexpected. The children grew up and left. That's what children do. The house became quiet again. I thought, now it will be different. Now we'll have time to sit together, to talk, to be something more than two people managing a household. But by then, we had forgotten how. We would sit in the same room in the evenings, he with his newspaper, me with my knitting or just my hands resting in my lap. Hours would pass like that. Not uncomfortable exactly, just empty. I tried once or twice to open something deeper. I asked him one evening if he was happy. He looked at me as if I had asked a strange question. Of course, he said, why wouldn't I be? I didn't know how to answer that, because I didn't know how to explain a feeling that didn't have a clear shape. I wasn't unhappy in a way you could point to. There was no single thing to fix, but there was something missing. And I had helped create that absence, piece by piece, every time I chose silence over honesty. Years passed like that. Birthdays, holidays, quiet dinners, routine checkups, small conversations about the weather and the news. People would visit and say how comfortable we seemed together, how easy. And they were right. It was easy. That was part of the problem. The moment that changed everything didn't feel like a moment at first. He fell ill in his late 70s. Nothing sudden, just a gradual weakening. Doctor visits, medications, more time at home. I took care of him. I learned new routines then. Pills at certain hours, appointments to remember, the careful way he needed help getting up from his chair. In those months, we spoke a little more. Not about the past, not about what we had been to each other, just practical things mostly. But there was a softness in him that hadn't been there before. Or maybe I just noticed it more because everything else had slowed down. One afternoon, he said, You've always been there. It was the closest he came to saying something like gratitude. I nodded. I wanted to say so many things in that moment. I wanted to tell him about the afternoons I had spent alone, about the conversations I had rehearsed in my head but never spoken, about how I had missed him even when he was sitting right across from me. I wanted to ask him if he had ever felt the same, but I didn't. I said, "Of course." That word again, of course, as if everything that had happened between us was inevitable, unquestionable. He died a few weeks later. It was quiet, no drama, just a slow slipping away in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and something else I couldn't name. I held his hand. I remember thinking, this is the last time, and still I didn't say those things. I told him he should rest. I told him I was there. I didn't tell him the truth. Not because I didn't want to, but because by then I didn't know how to begin. After the funeral, people came with their kind words. 52 years, they said. What a blessing. A love like that is rare. I stood there and accepted their condolences. I thanked them. What else was I going to do? Correct them? Explain that love can exist and still leave something unfinished? That two people can spend a lifetime together and still not fully know each other. That silence can feel safe while it's building and unbearable when it's all that's left. What is permanently lost is not just him. It is the version of us that never happened, the conversations we never had, the questions I never asked, the answers I never gave him the chance to offer. Time doesn't return those things. People say you should have no regrets if you did your best. I don't know about that. I did what I thought was right. I kept things running. I avoided conflict. I made sure the children were cared for, that the house was in order, that his needs were met. All of that was real. But there was another kind of responsibility I ignored. To speak honestly, to risk discomfort, to let him see me as I was, not just as the person who made everything work. I tell you this not because I think you should live differently. I'm too old to tell anyone what they should do. I only know what I wish I had understood while there was still time. I wish I had known that peace is not the same as closeness, that silence, when it becomes a habit, is very hard to break, that later is a fragile promise. You think it's waiting for you. You think you can step into it whenever you choose. But it moves. It keeps moving, quietly, until one day you realize you've run out of it. If you are sitting across from someone you have spent years with, and there is something you have been holding back, something small even, I hope you notice it. Not to fix anything, not to turn your life upside down, just to see it. To understand that these small, unspoken things don't disappear. They settle. They become the shape of what remains. I don't feel anger toward him. That's important to say. He lived the way he knew how, and I lived the way I knew how. We built a life that looked solid from the outside. In many ways it was. There were good moments, quiet ones, shared ones. I am not erasing those. I am only saying they were not the whole story. Now the house is very quiet, quieter than it ever was before. I sit in the same chair most evenings. Sometimes I catch myself turning my head as if I might still see him there with his newspaper. Habit stays long after everything else is gone. At my age, there isn't much left to plan. The days are simple. They begin and end without much variation. I think about the past more than I used to. Not all the time, just in small stretches. A memory comes, sits with me for a while, and then goes. This one, this understanding of what our marriage really was, took a long time to form. It didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces after he was gone, when there was finally enough silence for me to hear what had been missing all along. I don't expect anyone to remember me in a particular way. That used to matter more. Now it feels distant. What stays with me is simpler than that. A sense of how easily a life can pass while you are waiting for the right moment to say what matters, and how often that moment doesn't come, or comes too late. I'm 91 years old. There isn't a later for me anymore. There is only this quiet room, these thoughts, and whatever time is left to sit with them. If there is anything I have learned, it is not something I can wrap into advice. It is just this small, steady understanding that a life can look complete from the outside and still feel unfinished when you are the one who lived it. And that feeling doesn't make noise. It just stays.